Dreamscape presents St. Patrick's Day Murder by Leslie Meier, narrated by Karen White. Prologue. The last customer hadn't left the bar until nearly 2 a.m., well past the 11 p.m. closing time mandated by the town bylaws in Tinker's Cove, Maine. But that didn't bother Old Dan very much. He'd never been one to fuss about rules and regulations. No, he was one who took the inch and made it a mile. If they wanted him to close at 11, well, they could jolly well send over a cop or 2 or 10 and make him. Though he'd be willing to wager that wouldn't go down well with the clientele. He chuckled and scratched his chin, with its week's worth of grizzled whiskers. That crowd, mostly rough-and-ready fishermen, didn't have a high regard for the law, or for the cops who enforced it either. No, close the bilge before the customers were ready to call it a night, and there'd be a fine brouhaha. And anyway, he didn't sleep well these days, so there was no sense tossing out some poor soul before he was ready to go, because, truth be told, he didn't mind a bit of company in the wee hours. He knew that if he went home and to bed, he'd only be twisting and turning in the sheets, unable to calm his thoughts enough to sleep. That's why he'd started tidying the bar at night instead of leaving it for the morning. The rhythmic tasks soothed him, rinsing and drying the glasses, rubbing down the bar, wiping the tables, giving the floor a bit of a sweep. That's what he was doing, shuffling along behind a push broom to clear away all the dropped cigarette butts and matches and dirt carried in on cleated winter boots. He braced himself for the blast of cold and opened the door to sweep it all out, back where it belonged. But it wasn't the cold that took his breath away. It was a bird, a big crow, and it walked right in. "And what do you think you're doing?" he demanded, feeling a large hollowness growing inside him. "You know quite well, don't you?" replied the crow, hopping up onto the bar with a neat flap of his wings. The bird cocked his head and looked him in the eye. "Don't tell me an Irishman like you, born and bred in the old country, has forgotten the tale of Cuchulainn." He'd not forgotten. He'd heard the story often as a boy, long ago in...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?